With the Kommander, it replicates the press, long press, and double press. So double press starts and stops this. Long press will bring you to elevation, and short press, it's just going to change pages. So I figured it would be a good time to start talking about the things that users and hackers can build with Kommander. If you open it up and you look inside, you'll notice that you can basically reprogram Kommander and do whatever you want with it. We haven't released the pinouts and stuff yet, but they're easy enough to figure out. However, in the other side of things, just leaving the functionality as it is, plugging into the MMCX style jacks, and I keep reiterating, they are a standard jack. You can go out and get plugs and hook them up, and they already work and have functions. Now, we haven't talked a lot about what those functions are, except for cycle computer control. And last year, I did a video, or maybe the year before, where I spliced into the wires and built my own kind of climb shifters. And that was kind of useful, but because of the way the Campagnolo layout is, it's not that useful. Part of what enabled that hack was that I put the interface at the seat post, which I've never seen done before. But in order to do that, I had to make extension wires, and to make extension wires, basically they're chopped off of old broken shifters and then spliced together, maybe with an extra section of wire or something. So there are spots in there that I have heat shrink tubed, and I spliced into on the right shifter to make the climb shifter. The mode button has two functions, I'll say, for the interface and one function for communication. Now, on the interface side, the EPS interface, pressing and holding is trim, pressing and holding both is 0 set, so you adjust the settings for your derailleur to, and basically figures out the spacing between the gears. And the third thing, though, is they implemented the ANT Plus remote control profile. Unfortunately, that ANT Plus remote control profile works backwards. The cycle computer is the transmitter. It has very limited functionality, which is why we didn't implement that in Kommander. It's basically left stagnant for the last, 8 years. It's never been updated, and its functionality is really geared for everything with a very limited subsection for cycling. So, yeah, it's not very useful. However, that's an ANT Plus profile, and Campagnolo implemented it. So left button, I think, is lap, and right button is next page, and when you're pressing the mode. But if you press and hold, they turn into the interface settings buttons. Well, in version 11, or I should say in 11 speed and EPS interface of version 3, and actually this will work for older interfaces too, all the buttons are dumb buttons. They're just switches. So internally, they have a resistor that holds them up to a voltage. So this is the signal line. And when you press the button, it closes it, it brings it down to ground. So when this is not doing anything, this would read VCC. So 3 volts, 3.3 volts for the EPS interface. When you press the button, it reads ground. And then it runs through what's called debounce. It's because when you press a button, it sometimes chatters. And as a result of that, you could get like 100 shift commands. So they debounce it by running a little algorithm that says, is this really a press? Is the press stable? And we do that as well in Kommander. So it's very easy for these buttons to do other things potentially, except there's a couple of little gotchas. So Kommander has several different modes for the MMCX jacks. The current mode that's enabled by default right now, that if you wanted to go and plug into those jacks, is simple buttons. But those jacks also have the ability to be digital communication, supply some level, but a small amount of power for LED indicators, as well as having the ability for analog inputs, joysticks. You kind of get at where we're going with this. This is not a one-off thing. This is, do you want a joystick for steering? Do you want, maybe it ties into another sensor? Do you need LED indicators that tell you maybe it's a good time to shift? So right now, the simple switch, and you can see they're just simple switches. Through the miracle of movie making, I've installed a switch. And what does that switch do? Well, this mode button now, it goes to this switch. The ground is shared between Kommander and the interface. That's perfectly okay. But one of the tricky things that why we have to put in that switch is this is pulled to 3.3 volts regulated. This is pulled to a coin cell unregulated. So what happens here is that voltage could be 3 volts or 2.6 or 2.2, probably work around down to about 2 volts. Whereas if we tie them together, it could be dumping current back in. But with the switch, now we're just replicating what's here, but in the mode button. So flick it to one side, and now you have control of the EPS unit. So press and hold, you get trim mode, press and hold along with the other one, you get 0 set. Flip the switch, and now it goes directly into Kommander, bypassing the interface. So now those long presses that would activate adjustments are ignored, and they just go into Kommander and could be registered as long presses. Same thing with double presses. The EPS unit for pairing, because the backwards pairing method, you have to press within like a 10-second period, press the right button 5 times, press the left button 5 times in any sequence, and if that happens, it forgets what it's paired to, and then it looks for a new remote control. We don't get any of that here. We just get clean inputs. And this is called a single pole double throw switch. So there's one input, 2 kind of outputs. But you can also get double pole double throws, which are exceedingly common. And that would just parallel this so that we could do it to the other side. And that's basically all I've done here. My little inline switch just switches EPS or Kommander. And that enables me to have a much more accurate cycle computer connection. Now, if I did this for indoor cycling, those mode buttons would also give me the keyboard functionality. It's currently set up in a different way compared to the 2 buttons here. But it enables some different features. So it only 2 camera switching, I think use power ups, and I think even change screenshots. I actually have to check on all this because we're technically not releasing that aspect until we actually get an accessory out. And yes, we're working on accessories for this. So everyone's not going to have an EPS. So we're working on some simple plastic switches that can be placed by the hoods of your shifters, kind of like sprint shifters, and give you control of the Kommander. That way you don't even actually have to have the Kommander on your handlebars. You can have it on, using the elastomer band, you can put it under your stem and keep it hidden if you don't already have that area in use on a Di2 or an EPS style bike, or not using that area for cycle computer, or if you have SRAM, like a blip box mount. So that's basically it. It's a very simple little hack. I can do it, but if you really want to cut open those wires, you can get into it too. Just make sure your battery is disconnected before doing any of this from your shifting system. So hopefully you learned something. And if you're a hacker, you can just go buy some MMCX plugs and solder them up. There's lots on AliExpress or DigiKey or Mouser. So as you can see right here is the little switch that switches the mode buttons, these little guys in here, between Kommander all the way back here at the EPS interface. So that's a pretty odd place to put that, but that's where I wanted it for this. So the normal cables run up the length here, and you see they terminate in a connector, and that's because I built an extension that goes out to the shifters. They're not long enough otherwise. But that means I can splice into it, which I've done here. You can see that, and I've spliced into the other one as well. I mean, they were made of 2 pieces of cable, so I had to. But in previous videos, some people might remember that I had some thumb shifters here, and I had some issues with those last year, but they weren't that useful. So right now the Switchbox Right now the Switchbox allows me to switch between this mode, where it's going up to the wires, back down the wires out to the EPS system. So if I press and hold the mode button, just here with my thumb, and you can kind of see it's lit up purple there. That means it's in adjustment mode. Press it again, get it out of that mode. It's a safe setting, I haven't adjusted anything. If we come back here, we flick the switch, I'm gonna press the mode button. Ta-da! Now, unlike the built-in Campagnolo shifting system that has a Ant Plus remote, there's very limited things so you can do with that. With the Kommander, it replicates the press, long press, and double press. So double press starts and stops this. Long press will bring you to elevation, and short press, well, it's just going to change pages. Same thing on the other side. And long press goes to map, and double press is left. But I can now switch between those two on the fly. I just actually did that for dealing with some adjustment that I needed after putting my wheel back together.